I wanted to share with you something that has Abby Martin and Rania Khalek from the Soapbox. Abby Martin is from the Empire Files. They're talking together about a number of topics. This is just an excerpt, a 16-minute excerpt, and they're talking about the need to be anti-imperialist because we need to be internationalists, basically, and care about what the military-industrial complex is doing around the world to subjugate people in other countries. They talk about the elections. They talk about voter shaming. They talk about what are the differences between Trump and Biden. So there's a whole bunch of different things that they're discussing. This is just one excerpt of that, and I think you'll find it interesting. Thanks for watching, and subscribe to Abby Martin, of course, on Twitter, and Rania Khalek on Twitter. There's some information in the video about that. Thanks for watching.
And also, like, I think a lot of our wars have produced these refugee crises that have actually empowered the far right in various countries across the global north, whether it's Europe or here, like all of, whenever you have a flood of refugees from anywhere, the right just like jumps on that, and they always win more people to their side. So, I mean, from your perspective, like, why do progressives, why does the left need to be incorporating the issues of imperialism into their understanding of the world and into what they're pushing for?
So aside from the fact of just the morality argument, which is that we are literally citizens of the global hegemon and we have a duty, it is our duty to actually fight the military machine and to look out for the people who are being subjugated by it. Other than that, I think the mass awakening of capitalism in this country, people who are, tens of millions of young people who were part of Bernie's base, who are rejecting the notion that capitalism is the end-all be-all, that's really inspiring to me, Rania, and I think that people need to start incorporating imperialism into their understanding of what capitalism is, because imperialism is a stage of capitalism, right? The endless growth, the extraction from all these other countries, that is part of capitalism's trajectory. So if you take that and you start to understand that, it's just kind of by extension that you would start to care about international issues and how the U.S. military is affecting those issues, and how it all fits into global wealth and equality. And I think that the Black Lives Matter movement needs to start understanding that, Black and brown people who are killed and executed by the military around the world. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a Black person living in America who are, like Breonna Taylor. You can be killed in your own home by these out-of-control police officers, the same as if you're just a Pakistani or a Somali person or a Yemeni born in the wrong region of these countries. You can be killed and executed by a U.S. drone strike, by a special forces operation in the middle of the night. It's the same struggle, the same fight. And like you said, all of these things need to coalesce. Like, we need to understand that U.S. imperialism is kind of the root, the undercurrent that links all these struggles together. Police are trained by Israel. Police are given surplus military equipment because our out-of-control military, we just have so much to spare. And that is continuing to militarize our police here at home. And also just, the kids at the border in cages. That is also linked to, like you said, the refugee crisis, all of these coups, all of these undermining of democratic processes around the world causes an upsurge of refugees. That report, I forget from where, maybe Brown University, that said like up to 56 million people were displaced from the war on terror. 56
Yeah, that number is shocking, and it was like people didn't even it didn't register. It was like
it doesn't register, and like you said, it's exploited. All it is exploited as a political tool to divide the population and to be scared of immigrants and to blame everything on the other, when really it is our fault. It is this government's fault. And so it's stunning to me that, this racial tensions kind of arise from policies that are directly implemented from our government, that if people really cared, and imagine how horrific that is to have to like uproot your home. Like, none of these people want to do that. No one wants to leave. No one wants to get on a boat in the Mediterranean and travel for hundreds of miles where they could possibly drown to go to a foreign country. Like, wrap your mind around that, and that's due to our foreign policy, our war on terror. And that's just in the last 20 fucking years.
Yeah.
That's happened. Linking these struggles together and having the mass consciousness and the media literacy and the political education to make people aware that all of these things link together And I think it's just by default they'll start caring about the empire and U.S. military and imperialism, because it really all connects, Rania. And we don't know when these mass consciousness moments are going to happen. We don't know when the swells are going to erupt. Just like Black Lives Matter, no one could have predicted that. No one could have predicted George Floyd would cause months-long, millions of people in the streets. No one could have predicted that the Iraq War mass movement would happen. That forced the hand of government. That really did. And now we have politicians who know that they need to denounce the Iraq War to actually be taken seriously. And Obama won, let's face it, on anti-war rhetoric. And of course, we know that Trump used anti-war populism to pose himself to the left of Hillary Clinton, which I guess wasn't hard to do. But I think that if people, and then climate change, like we said, understanding the U.S.'s role in that, the world's biggest polluter, like all of these things, we need to just have that mass political education about, but also just getting involved in the movement, getting involved in political activism, and not pledging all of your bets or putting all of your hopes in electoralism, because this is stuff that we need to be doing on a day-to-day basis. And we need to put in the work, Rania, because again, we don't know when these moments are going to happen, and we need to be there to help guide the struggle to where it needs to go and to force the hand of government, because mass movements are the only thing that has ever done that.
That was so beautifully said. And I see people are putting in questions in like the question box, and you kind of answered a lot of them but I think that ultimately what you're saying is, like, if we're going into the question of how do we defeat the establishment, is it's not just by voting. Like, voting is like the tiniest little thing you can do. It's not electoralism. It's actually mass movement building and educating people around these issues, because, like, you don't know when things are going to boil over. And when they do boil over, you want people to have that understanding and that education and that basis for, like, recognizing how connected all of these things are. But on the issue of voting, even though, like, I think we both agree that it's not the end all be all, like, electoralism isn't going to defeat anything, it still does matter, especially if you're in like those 3 swing states that determine the entire election. So I guess, like, I don't like to voter shame. I think people vote for whoever the hell you want to. But I do think it's wrong to, like, I think that, like, my take is, and people get mad at me for this, but I think that under a Biden administration, it will be easier for the left to organize than under a Trump administration. I feel like Donald Trump has moved the country further to the right. He's actually moved the left further to the right, because everything has become about this reality TV show of Donald Trump, and it's all on his terms. And now we're having to argue over things that we didn't have to argue over 4 or 5 years ago. So I don't know, what's your take on, like, the lesser evil voting, and, like, whether or not, like, is there a difference between these two candidates? Like if somebody was like, Abby, I live in Michigan, who should I vote for? What would you say?
You're right. I mean, the sad truth is that the Electoral College really makes voting, it renders it basically meaningless for the vast majority of people in this country. New York and California, like, if you don't live in a swing state, I would absolutely say vote your conscience. There's no reason to vote for the lesser of two evils if you don't live in one of those 10 swing states or so. I think that stopping voter shaming is the absolute most important thing we need to do. We understand that the non-voter bloc is the largest bloc of,
like 100 million people don't vote, or something crazy like that.
People in this country that are eligible to vote don't. What does that say about how the election is background noise? It doesn't provide any sort of change for any of these people who are really suffering under the system. But for the people who are engaged and who do vote, yeah, I mean, the fact that in 2016, I think, if I'm not mistaken, more people in some of these swing states went out and actually voted down ballot and left President blank. And that was more people than actually voted Green Party. Yet the Green Party is continuously shamed. Bernie's base will continue to be blamed if Biden loses this election. And that is absolutely horrific, right? You can't keep doing that to people. Give people something to hope for. Give people something to vote for, baby brain. And I always kind of pledge to the Eugene Debs quote that says, I would rather vote for something I want and not get it than vote for something I don't want and get it. And so as a Californian, I continue to vote for my conscience. I'm going to vote for Gloria La Riva here in this state. But I think that we should stop vote shaming people who want to vote for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
certain states. Trump is a scary motherfucker. He's galvanizing crazy right-wing militias. The rhetoric alone is really, really scary, dividing the country into potential like civil war type scenarios. And yeah, I agree. Like, for some reason, we've devolved into this kind of thing where a lot of people are just obsessively criticizing Democrats instead of criticizing like this really, really scary fascistic, cartoon fascistic resurgence in the Donald Trump administration. And we don't need to compare him to Hitler or Mussolini. He is his own brand of fascism. Like, he is a fucking cartoon fascist, and he is an existential threat to the planet just from the issue of climate change alone, because there's so many things that could happen. The fires alone in California are so devastating. Like, that shit is not going to change. It's just going to get worse. This is our new normal. But again, I'm not going to vote shame anyone. Like, I totally understand if you can't suck it up and vote for Joe Biden. I wouldn't do that either. But I totally get people who feel like they need to. And I think it's wrong to downplay the threat of Donald Trump. Yes, the Democrats laid the groundwork for this, of course. Like, we can acknowledge that and also acknowledge where we are. We can criticize the Democrats and also criticize how dangerous what we're seeing is. And that's where I feel like we've kind of lost the plot. Like, we just need to have more depth to our understanding and our criticism, and also left movement building, because we're so divided among the left, and we're just squabbling and fighting over all this shit.
And we're such a tiny faction as it is that we can't really afford to be eating each other.
Right. And also a lot, and I don't know if it's a lot of leftists, but I feel like a lot of people in general have bought into the fact that Donald Trump is actually less dangerous when it comes to war and foreign policy. And that is just completely
I've heard that. I've heard that. I mean, I haven't heard that. I've heard that analysis from people, and I don't agree with it. It's this sort of accelerationist analysis,
right?
Where Trump is destroying the U.S. and I'm he's actually not destroying the U.S. The U.S. is just fine. He's just he's making everybody fight each other. There's literally clashes. People are shooting at each other at protests.
He thrives he literally is a chaos president, and that's something that I think unlike we've ever seen before, at least in my lifetime. Someone who literally thrives on sowing chaos.
I think the last person that's been equated to that is Woodrow Wilson. We weren't alive during Woodrow Wilson, but I mean, actually inflamed, he inflamed the Ku Klux Klan and encouraged them. And I think Donald Trump, what the president says matters.
Right.
It's not the only thing that matters, but it's a very powerful person. And when they encourage violence and encourage encourage right-wing militias to go intimidate protesters, that's really bad news.
Say the left is the enemy. Literally people are wanting to kill leftists. We are going back to an era of anti-communism that has not existed since.
And it happened. There's it could happen. The Kyle Rittenhouse went and shot a protester. Shot and killed a protester. People are, this is it's becoming reality. It's not just online. And that's what I think is dangerous. That's why Donald Trump just needs to not be president anymore. It's detrimental to the left, and you can't organize because all of the energy also gets sucked into this bullshit resistance crap. Right. That's just the neoliberal Democrat corporate wing of that party ends up sucking up all that energy into just vote for us and and everything will be fine.
Right.
And that's kind of what's happened is I'm not denying the importance of the last few months of protests, but a lot of that angst and energy has gone towards the neoliberal Democrats rather than left movement building.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel that, we could have a breather under a Joe Biden, and also a Biden administration would make it cool to criticize Democrats again.
Yeah, right.
Without being called a Russian asset.
We would have Trump derangement syndrome if we dare to criticize our dear leader again. That really kills me. It's all these people who loved me during Obama. They're just what happened to you? I'm nothing. I'm just criticizing.
Just Trump is president now.
Yeah, the person at the helm of U.S. empire. That just changed because I'm not a partisan hack. But I mean, the fact that people even believe Trump's anti-war rhetoric, I just saw Rand Paul tweet today, vote for Biden-Harris if you want endless war. Trump's going to end all the wars. It's he hasn't ended.
He had 4 years.
Increased militarism and bombing everywhere that the U.S. military is engaged in. What are you talking about? He's a con artist. He's a con artist. He talks out of both sides of his mouth. And when you look at the reality, he's actually one of the biggest puppets for the military-industrial complex we've ever seen. He appointed the top 3 defense contractors to the top 3 Pentagon policy positions. So I agree with you. I think that another 4 years of Trump, we could possibly see a lot more political persecution, people facing decades in prison for, I mean, like, quote unquote, or like being a part of these looting or whatever they want to allege onto protesters, PSL organizers. You discussed this on a recent soapbox. People are facing decades or years in prison already for simply organizing things like sit-ins, right? These have been fundamental to the civil rights movement and political organizing for as long as we've been alive. So it's very dangerous on that issue alone, I think, and the fact that we can organize a lot more efficiently and better without being scared of like being black bagged and thrown into unmarked vans.
Yeah.
Being out protesting is scary. And I think that if it boils down to like, oh, well, people won't be out in the streets under Joe Biden, that says more like that's where we come in, where we need to politically
but also if you look at under Obama, people were in the streets.
Right,
Occupy Wall Street happened,
yes.
right? Black Lives Matter, like Ferguson, Baltimore,
yes.
that happened under Obama first.
Great point. And so I think that that's like a non-issue. Like when people are, the accelerationism thing, right? Like, oh, well, more people would get out in the streets for Trump. It's like, we need to like not have that be hinged on our what our notion is of political organizing. Like it's about an everyday struggle, and it doesn't matter who the president is. But I do think that Trump is going to make it a lot more difficult because fuck knows what's going to happen in the administration around you. It's pretty scary. And also like the whole war with Iran thing, like that could be
that's going to happen if Donald Trump is president. We're going to have a war with Iran. Like the people in charge of his Iran policy are literally Mike Pompeo, who's like an end-timer, rapture-ready psychopath who thinks Iran is the root of all evil. And he's like working hand in hand with Bibi Netanyahu and Elliot Abrams, who was an architect of the Iraq War and has wanted to destroy Iran. Abby, where can everybody follow your incredible work?
Thank you so much. You can look at Empire Files on YouTube. You can check out our latest work. We did a documentary on the Afghanistan war, the imperial conspiracy behind it, the differences between the two candidates on foreign policy. You can go to Vimeo and check out Gaza Fights for Freedom in Spanish, Arabic, and English. And also Media Roots Radio, the podcast that I host with my brother. Thank you so much, Rania.
Thank you for coming on. It was so good to see you. And you were also no baby brain. You were like, you're like amazing. It's like, I love listening to you talk. I could just listen, like we could just sit here and listen to you comment on everything. But thank you so much. It was so good to see you. And thank you everyone who joined us. And let's do this again soon. Love you too. Bye everyone.